that process was really successful. Doing things like that probably landed me my first 10 or so clients. If you just look like everyone else, you're just going to be scrapping for the scraps of clients, quite literally.
Hello, James. Welcome to the podcast. Super excited to have you here. To kick things off, can you tell the audience about yourself, your company, and your journey since 2012?
Wow, yeah, that's a little while now. So I'm James, as you've said. Currently, I own and operate a search engine optimization agency called SEO Sherpa. That was established in 2012. Up until this point, we manage around 60 active clients, have a team of about 60 people also, and deal with brands all over the world.
Right. So it's 2012, right, when SEO Sherpa was started. What made you choose SEO as your focus? Was there a moment when you realized, okay, SEO is the space that I want to be in?
Yeah, originally the agency started as a sort of broad multi-service digital marketing agency. And then it slowly evolved into being a core search engine optimization agency. I think the things that attracted me specifically to SEO was firstly the fact that it's both data and creative led. Myself as an individual, I'm very much split between a left brain and a right brain thinker. I like the balance of the data and the numbers, but also the artistry, which SEO really offers. That was a big appeal to me. I think the second thing was probably the recurring revenue aspect of the business model. I had come from a business environment that really relied upon short-term sales strategies, and there was a lot of unpredictability to that business model, which meant that you only could really kind of forecast your revenue the next 4 to 6 months out. And I really loved this idea of a recurring retainer based model because you get predictability and consistency, and that allows you to gradually scale the business over time. And have a little bit of, let's say, security in your future, which definitely something that aligned very well with my mindset at that particular moment.
Understood. Understood. That is something I also look forward to. Like whenever when I started my own agency, recurring revenue is something that was always a checkbox that I have to check before I started this.
Yeah, it's much better to be able to sell a client once and collect from them over and over and over again, as opposed to having to sell them many times over to collect once with each transaction. So, yeah, it's a big learning lesson for anyone in the agency space. Whenever you can lock in some form of recurring model, either as the core offer or some back end offer that is sold off the back of maybe a project, that really helps you build and sustain a much more solid business for the long term.
Right. Also, James, I wanted to ask you this on our intro call itself. Why the name SEO Sherpa? Because it's so unique. I've never heard of it. Like, how did you come up with it? Is there a story behind it?
Yeah, well, the name is really a metaphor for what we do as an agency and also how we operate. So, Sherpas, if you are not familiar, are mountain guides that help climbers go to the peak of Mount Everest. And that really explains the role that we take on with our clients. So we are partners to them, helping them climb the peaks of search engines. And it seemed like a really good name that aligned with really how we wanted to position ourselves in the market. So that's that's the long story. The short story is that I saw the domain available. I realized it was a really nice domain that was both like catchy and descriptive. And I was able to get it on the secondhand market for a very reasonable rate back then. I think I paid $500 for that domain. And it's been a very worthwhile investment because, of course, it has materialized into much more than that in terms of value.
Right. Right. That actually makes total sense. Sherpas are the ones who carry 80 to 100 kgs on their shoulders and walk up the Mount Everest. And whereas the climbers just walk free, right?
Yeah,
And you
exactly.
guys do the whole carrying for the companies. Okay, that totally makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, we do the heavy lifting to help our clients, ascend to the heights that they have aspirations to reach. And like Sherpas themselves, we've got the experience of having been there and done it many times before. So we can help those that are trying to do it for the first time.
Right. Right. So James, you work with some huge companies, right? You have 60 huge companies that you're working with. for example, American Express, HSBC, Nissan. But let's rewind a little bit. Let's go back to 2012.
Yeah.
Who was your first client and how did you land them?
Yeah. The first client was someone I knew and had a relationship with through my previous business undertakings. And my approach there was that this person and others that followed, I mean, this was really my strategy back in the early days, was approaching those people that I already had a relationship with, those people that already knew me, liked me, and hopefully trusted me. And then I went back to those and I told them about my new venture and pitched to provide those services to them. And the way that I went about doing that was through video reviews. Back in the day, it was much more cumbersome than it is right now because I had to do a screen recording on ScreenFlow, if anyone remembers that software. I'd then have to export that, download it, I'd upload it to a video player. I would then embed that video player onto a custom page on my own WordPress website. I then have to fill that page with, some form of like call to action, and then eventually I would be able to take that link, put it in an email, and then send it to them. That itself took about an hour per video, so it was way, way, way more cumbersome than it would be just flicking open a Loom video. But what that did is it rebuilt the connection with the audience I was approaching, and it also positioned me as having expertise in my new field of domain, right? So whilst they trusted me as an individual, which goes a long way, what they probably couldn't yet do at that stage was credentialize me for the new line of business that I was operating in. But that process was really successful. Doing things like that probably landed me my first 10 or so clients.
That's awesome. So also, James, like you already know that I run a recruitment agency called House of Staff, where I place marketers from India with startups and agencies abroad. I
Yep.
understand that hiring is crucial, right? Like especially in the early days. So what were the qualities that you were looking for in those very first hires that you made for SEO Sherpa? And if someone's starting an agency today, do you think they should build a team early on, or should they wait until they get a steady source of revenue and then build a team?
There's different ways of going about this. So my preferred strategy, and the one that I generally recommend to others in the agency space first getting started, is not to use freelancers and actually not to hire. The reason for that is that hiring, of course, commits you to medium term expenses, right? You're going to have to pay someone's salary. You can't and shouldn't hire someone and then flip them if you're not hitting the revenue goals you need to actually fund their wages. And also freelancers can be good for like ad hoc stuff, but don't necessarily give you the scalability that you would get from your own team. So the third option, and the one that I started with, was actually using a wholesale provider. So an agency that specializes in delivering SEO services at wholesale rates that I could then buy and then repackage and sell on. Why do that? Well, they've got a large team of people to pull from, which gives you scalability. They've also got proven processes, and they've got most of the operations sort of down pat and running. So all I really needed to do at that stage was focus on the sales, and then I had a ready-made back-end solution that could then do the delivery.
Right. So since we're talking about hiring right now, have you looked into hiring remote workers from, say, countries like Philippines or India? Because a lot of agencies that I spoke to, they're basically leveraging global talent
Yep.
uh, to save cost at the same time high quality talent, right? So what's your take on that? Like, do you hire remote?
Yes, we absolutely do. I think our first maybe 8 or 10 hires were probably all from the Philippines. So we hired one, and then they found another, and then they referred another, and that was, yeah, probably up to about the 10 mark, give or take. So I'm a real big advocate of distributed teams. We were doing it well before it was trendy, um, and that really helped us both acquire talent at rates that we could make the business economics work, but more importantly than that, actually access a far larger pool of talent than would be available to us locally. Where we stand now is we're pretty much split between 50% co-located, which is here in the office that you see me in now, and then 50% distributed. So we have now a mix of very high touch, high collaboration roles working side by side in office, and then individual contributor roles are almost exclusively hired remotely, where we can access talent pools that would just not be available to us.
Also, so once you have great people on board, like you said, you hire remote, you hire co-remote. So once you have great people, great talent on board,
Yeah,
keeping them engaged is another challenge, right? So what do you do
yeah.
to create a culture that makes people want to stick around at SEO Sherpa? Because a lot of these people are working remote; they're not directly connected to you or the team in house. So what do you do to retain the employees?
Yeah. Well, if you're talking specifically about distributed teams, you really do need to make concerted and active efforts to engage that employee force, because, you know, a lot of businesses who do operate a remote model almost just treat those people like external contractors and don't get them involved in the business. That's a huge mistake. So we do both activities that exist digitally, and we do activities that exist in person in real life. Online, we're doing regular socials where we bring the whole team together. Online we have different kind of water cooler rooms on Slack. We have regular meetings and catch ups. We have really good structured like one-to-ones and small group meetings. But we also make a concerted effort to engage with our distributed team offline. So we hold an annual retreat where we bring the entire company together. So last year, for example, we actually went to the Philippines and we took 50 team members and brought them all together in a big hotel resort that we hired out. We did workshops, we did fun stuff like swimming with whales and visiting waterfalls and those sorts of things. And that really did a great job to pull the team together. So the money that you save from operating distributed teams, if you can put a portion of that back into bringing the team together, or even as a founder, just going to visit some of those team members in person, you'll get such a huge payoff from that.
So, let's say for agency owners who are trying to decide between hiring full-time employees and freelancer, you said not to do both, but to get a wholesale contractor who provides a service and then just focus on the sales, right? Okay,
Yeah,
that makes sense.
yeah,
And while I was speaking to some of my agency owners, friends who were agency owners, uh, one of the things that I found the most hardest was client acquisition.
yeah.
So, uh, how has your strategy changed when you just started in 2012, and since you are I mean, you're big now? How
Yeah,
is it now? Like, is there a difference, or do you follow the same strategies that you followed in 2012?
yeah. It's definitely evolved over time. I mean, one of the big areas of focus for us has been on building brand, which is easier said than it is done. But we've put a real concerted effort into establishing ourselves within the market. A lot of that has been, content marketing driven, events, workshops, meetups, guest appearances, and so on and so forth. Now, it's a real slow burner, and it's something that you need to commit to for a long period of time before you see results yield. So you would always want to be looking a little bit more blended to begin with, where you can access more bottom of the funnel opportunities. But the sooner that you can start to shift your focus towards more brand led activities, it will give you opportunity to drive higher yield customers.
Right. So, okay. So keeping clients or retaining clients is just as important as getting them, right? Or just as difficult as getting them. So, what
Yep.
do you do to make sure that a client stays loyal to you or just sticks with your service? Like, what do you do? Because SEO is a competitive space, right? There's a lot of agencies, a lot of people.
Yep.
How do you make sure the clients stick to you?
First thing is actually selecting the right clients in the first place, that makes a huge difference. So if you can actually identify the clients that are a really good candidate for your services and make sure that you work with those predominantly, that will really help with retention. And that could be the obvious ones, like they've got um, good cash reserves, long-term mindset, understand SEO, don't need short-term immediate results. These types of things can be of course really, really important. But then there's also the aspect of like the softer signals, maybe industries that you really enjoy working in and can get enthusiastic about, and so on and so forth. So I think client selection I found is extremely important. The reason that clients typically leave is when expectations are not met. So the first thing to do is really set expectations that you're confident that you can execute on and the client understands. Then you want to, of course, exceed those expectations, through initiatives that are going to surprise and delight. So getting results before you expected to get them, or delivering additional scope that they otherwise wouldn't have expected. Those are the sorts of things that keep a client super sticky. And then you need to really get the client thinking in a long-term fashion. So that's not just setting expectations, but actually also always putting forward things for the client to actually get excited about on beyond the field of the kind of the short-term strategy and focus.
Right.
Yeah.
So was there a situation where you had to reject a client although the client wanted to work with you? Was there an instance?
Yeah, we've rejected lots of clients. I mean, we only onboard about 5% of the leads that we speak to. So and we generate anything between 30 and 50 leads per week, typically on average, and a lot of that is down to just poor fit. So maybe they're just in an industry that we can't help, or maybe there's a pre-existing client conflict. Maybe they've got the wrong expectations around SEO, and other services would be a better fit for them, so we guide them in that direction. Or of course, very commonly for an agency of our size and scale, they may not have the appropriate budget that enables them to unlock working with us. So that happens extremely frequently, and it wasn't always that way. Would accept a lot more than we do now. So we are in that privileged position where we can do that.
So let's move on to pricing. This is something
Yeah.
I also struggled with in the beginning. So pricing is a huge challenge for new agencies, right? Because when you start a new agency, people want to underprice just to win a client,
Yeah.
right? So what do you suggest to new agency owners? How should they go about pricing, and how did you go about pricing when you started SEO Sherpa?
Yeah. Well, they definitely shouldn't discount price, because that's just a race to make the least amount of money. So I definitely recommend against that. I started because I worked with a vendor, literally just 3xing the price that they charged me, and sold that on to the client at 300% basically, and that formula pretty much holds true today. Now, of course, I'm not buying services and reselling them anymore, but I am buying labor, right? I employ many staff, and they take home salaries, and I'm looking to make 3 times the returns on the investment I make in their wages, right? The best way to price, quite honestly, is value-based pricing. And that's essentially just looking at, well, what is the value of my service to this particular customer, or this set of customers? And then if you're actually targeting the best industries that can have the best returns from your services, that's when you can increase your margins far higher than a 3x.
So, looking beyond 2025, what trends do you think agencies need to focus on to stay ahead of the curve?
I think the biggest area of focus really for any agency should be on research and development. If you're relying on strategies that worked in the past, and you're getting your information sources around what to do from what exists online, you're going to be 20 steps behind, because things are moving really, really quickly. So I definitely recommend that as much time and energy you can put into testing different technologies, platforms, methods, those sorts of things to stay at the cutting edge, you absolutely should do. I think if we're talking specifically about SEO, of course, we are seeing a democratization of platforms. So we're seeing search move across, social, GPTs, vertical search engines. I think as SEOs, which is really welcoming to me, we've now got to start to think like marketers rather than just think like SEOs. We're not just optimizers now, we're marketing strategists, and we should be able to identify where our customers should be, how they should access those places, and then be able to leverage the tools and technologies and talent that's needed to get our clients there.
So, how should the agency owners who are just starting out should prepare for the changes that are coming in the future?
I think agencies that are starting out probably have an advantage to some extent, because they won't necessarily be carrying a lot of overheads and a huge amount of talent. I think they can really start to invest in these new technologies now and become a master of them. We need to be able to utilize and leverage AI effectively, and I think those agencies that are not necessarily bedded in with a lot of heavy people resource can probably be a little bit more dynamic and agile in actually utilizing those technologies today.
And finally, for someone who's just again starting their agency, what's the first action, the first step that they should take after watching the podcast?
I think the point of difference that we discussed is really, really important, like establishing how they're going to go to market and position themselves against all of the players that they will compete against. If you can really nail that go to market strategy where you do have a proposition that's very, very different, that does offer much more value than the competition, you'll be able to close more effectively and close at higher rates, which then means that you've got more cash resource, you can reinvest that in the business, and you can scale much more quickly. If you just look like everyone else, you're just going to be scrapping for the scraps of clients, quite literally. So I think focus that. There's some great books on that topic. They're old now, but I think the information that Jack Trout and partners put out, which was probably like the 80s maybe, but it still holds true today. If you can just get over them talking about like television and other major media like that, which is obviously not relevant anymore, but like what they talk about from a strategic standpoint is very useful.